year. Now, tomorrow, here at the time of recording, is going to be the Hilula of a famous Rosh Yeshiva. His name was Rabbi Yona Navon. It's going to be Tet Zayin Shvat, 16th of Shvat. Obviously, naturally, we happen to be on Tu B'Shvat at the time of recording. He was a very great rabbi of his time. He was born in the year 1713. He passed away in 1760 in February of that specific year. So we're talking about 234 years ago. He was a Talmid Chacham in Jerusalem, and especially in the 18th century, and a famous Shlochei de Rabbanan. Rabbinic emissary, and he would go various travelings and be the author of a great Torah colossal book called Nachva B'Kesef. If I'm not mistaken, he was also, I think, the rabbi of the famous Chida, Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulay. Let's explore a few of the highlights of the famous rabbi's life. A lot to unpack over here today. Okay, so he would be born in Jerusalem, and I believe his father's name was Rabbi Chanon Navon. If I'm not mistaken. And it says over here, Nolad Birshnam Rab Chanon Navon, Mimeno Hitiatem Begil Tesha. Sadly, I think he was orphaned at 9 years of age. But Siatot Lamad Bishivat Bet Yaakov Pereira. Now, Etzel Arab Yisrael Mei Mizrahi. So we'll learn in the famous Yeshivat Bet Yaakov Pereira, over there, a video we recorded about not so long ago. That yeshiva itself, it was one of the most outstanding yeshivas. I think it was actually opened in the year 1691 originally, and I think many great rabbis, it actually came from a famous philanthropist, Jacob Pereira from Amsterdam, would actually do it up. And I think very much connected to the famous Rabbi Cheskia de Silva, if I'm not mistaken, the author of the Pri Chadash, this Talmudic academy. Great rabbis that were very much connected to it, including Rabbi Moshe Galante. And many rabbis would actually go do Shlochei de Rabbanan, and people would go. There was other famous rabbis, Rabbi Abraham Yisrael Zevi, if I'm not mistaken, would have been connected also to it. There's a whole history behind it. This yeshiva itself would have various different famous Rosh Yeshivot, or heads in of itself. Really, rabbis, we're talking about a cluster from Jerusalem, including Rabbi Avram Yitzchaki, if I'm not mistaken. He would actually go on to become a Rishon LeZion between 1715 to 1722, and the author of the Zera Abraham. Also, another rabbi, Rabbi Eliezer Nachum. He was, if I'm not mistaken, a head of Jewish court, Rosh Yeshiva in Adrianopol, also in Turkey, author of great books. He was very much connected and was once again decorated with the title of Rishon LeZion, if I'm not mistaken. And Rabbi Yitzchak Kohen Rappaport, another key rabbi over there connected. And he was also Rishon LeZion, if I'm not mistaken, and the author of the Batei Kahuna, Rabbi Raphael Miuchas Bar Shmuel. He was a famous rabbi of his time. He himself passed away, I believe, in the year 1771. There was Rabbi Yitzchak Kobo, another great rabbi, who would, I think, be the Rosh Yeshiva Knesset Israel, if I'm not mistaken. Rabbi Abraham Ashkenazi, and Rabbi Yisrael Mei Mizrahi, who we just spoke about over here, and we'll speak about him in due course over there. But this is a famous yeshiva. And obviously Rabbi Yona Navon was one of the outstanding educators there. There was also Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulay. The Chida later on will be very much part of that, who will go on to become one of the great Kabbalists inside the world, and author of many different great books, including a bibliography, if I'm not mistaken. There was also Rabbi Nissim Chaim Moshe Mizrahi, another great famous rabbi. I think he was in his time period. It was Rishon LeZion. Rabbi Yisrael Meir Mizrahi, who we're going to speak about in a minute. Rabbi Mansur Marzok, if I'm not mistaken, another rabbi we've spoken about on various occasions before. He himself, I think, was one of the great rabbis of Aram Tzavai in Jerusalem, and author of the Korban Elitzur. Rabbi Mansur Marzok was. I think his Hilula is on the 3rd of Sivan. I think we did record a video about him at the time period of his Hilula. I very much have to point out, everyone tuning in live over here, welcome to our community, and please subscribe to the channel, as we've got some phenomenal content and biography videos of great scholars of yesteryear. So please join our community and subscribe at the moment to the channel, as we are recording about a famous Rabbi Yona Navon over here in this special edition. Okay, so this was a famous Yeshivat Bet Yaakov Pereira, where he was learning under auspices of Rabbi Yisrael Mei Mizrahi, who he was the Pri Haaretz. I want to say something about Rabbi Mizrahi for a minute, because he was a great rabbi of his time. He himself, I think, was born in 1700, passed away in 1756. if I'm not mistaken. He was, some people said that maybe he was born in the year 1690, actually. So I have to double check that. He was a son of Rab Abraham Mizrahi, the author of the Zichron Lebnei Israel, which was a Torah colossal book, Laws of Shechita, kosher slaughter. And and he was very, very close. I think his brother, if I'm not mistaken, was Rab Nissim Chaim Moshe Mizrahi, who was the author of the Shut Adamat Kodesh, if I'm not mistaken. He would actually be going on to become the Rishon LeZion at a later stage. Rabbi Yisrael Meir Mizrahi originally learned in Yeshivat, I believe, Bet Yaakov. And to give the full title, Yeshivat Bet Yaakov Pereira, if I'm not mistaken. That was of Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael Pereira in Jerusalem. And there was other great rabbis he himself was learning with, including Rabbi Yehuda Cohen Tanuchi, and Rav Avram Yitzchaki, if I'm not mistaken, at who we just mentioned about beforehand, and much is actually said over about Rabbi Yisrael Meir Mizrahi. Just to add on a few more words within regards to him, because it's kind of a topic. He was also a Shluchei Rabbanan, a very important point in time. Well, I think he would go to Greece. He would spend time in Turkey. He would author other great responses, if I'm not mistaken. And he was close to other rabbis, including the Machaneh Ephraim, Rav Ephraim Navon, for example, and various other people. I think, just to point out, I think he would have a connection with the famous Rabbi Yehuda Rosanis, who was the author of the Mishnah Lamelech. There was also the famous correspondence with Rabbi Chaim Moshe Amarillo, if I'm not mistaken, another rabbi who's spoken about beforehand. And I think he would become eventually a dayan, a judge, in a court in the land of Israel. And I think he was actually the rabbi of Rav Eliezer Nachum, we have to point out also, the author, and various different undertakings. Well, he was eventually, I think, buried in Har HaZeitim and authored many, many great books, let's just say, in of itself. So you can see, including Shut Pri Haaretz and Ner HaMizrahi, if I'm not mistaken. And if I'm not mistaken, Benav Haya Rabbi Shlomo Chaya Mizrahi Rav David Mizrahi. So you can see it was very much connected to that great school from, let's just say, of rabbis that happen to have come from Salonika, from Turkey, of that specific era of time. That's something that we have to point out over there. Very, very interesting. But let's continue over here, friends. Speaking about the famous Rabbi Yona Navon, because we're speaking about him today. Okay, he Nemene im Chochmei Yeshiva Yipaer Anavi. B'shnat Taf Kuf Bet Hikim Rabbi Chaim Ben Natar at Knesset Israel. I think that's specifically here. Rabbi Chaim Ben Natar would open the famous Yeshiva Knesset Israel. Who echel ilmad sham. Echel mishnat Taf Kuf Vav. Amad Bereshut Yeshiva. Who ben 33. He was 33 years of age at that point in time. שנים לאחר מכן עמד ברשות ישיבת גדולות מרדכי יחד עם ידידו הדגן רב שם טוב גבאי. So he would actually be there over there. Remember, we spoke about the Bet Yaakov Pereira one, who was Rav Shem Tov Gabbai. He was at Rosh Yeshiva and a dayan in Jerusalem during the 18th century, and was one of the expert Talmidim, let's just say, of Rabbi Chaim Ben Attar, respectively. We did record a video with regards to Rabbi Shem Tov Gabbai. I think we did. One time we were traveling to Jerusalem by bus, and we did speak about him, if I recollect. So that would be actually maybe good. We actually recorded it, I think, in July the 14th, 2025, just to point out over there. So very, very interesting, just a side tidbit. Okay, so let's continue speaking about Rav Yona Navon. Ba'oto et nishlach kshtal Turkey Yavan. He would be sent out to places like Turkey, Greece, also Mitzrayim, also Algiers, Tunis, and he eventually will return to Jerusalem. So you can see it was very well traveled. I think in Turkey, בטורקיה הדפיס גם את ספרו, נכפה בכסף חלק א', he would be over there. הרב יונה נבון היה רבם מובהק, שניים מגדולי הדור הבא. He'd become the rabbi of two really, really great rabbis that will become emerging in the next generation, including Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulay, also known as a Chida, and Rav Yom Tov Al-Ghazi, for example. Over here, he would go on to become a Rishon LeZion and Rosh Yeshivat of the Yeshivat Mekubalim, Yeshivat Bet El, if I'm not mistaken. And very, very awesome. Hu haraglim migil tza'ir lichtov tshuva b'halacha v'aya bodek u'me'ir et harato. Lacha shechaza mona ledayan, after he would be return and be appointed as a dayan, bebeit dino shel Rishon LeZion harab Yitzchak Kohen Rababot. Remember we spoken, he would actually go there under his thing. And let's say something about Rav Rappaport, because he's got very interesting, he's from that league of rabbis of that point in time. He lived between 1679 to 1755. He was a Rishon LeZion in Jerusalem. He was a rabbi, he was a posek in Izmir, and the author of the Batei Kehuna, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, I think he actually came from, if I'm not mistaken, he was born in Jerusalem to Rabbi Yehuda. I think Rabbi Yehuda, his father, actually came from Poland, if I'm not mistaken, from Lublin. And I think that his grandfather from his mother's side was was author of the Da'at Kedoshim, if I'm not mistaken. I have to double check that over there. And I think Rav Rappaport was very much part of the Bet Din structure of Rav Moshe Galanti, if I'm not mistaken. And he would actually learn under auspices of Rav Hesku de Silva, who was the author of the Pri Chadash. And very much would be part of the Shivat Bet Yaakov, of those stages at times. And very well decorated history. I think he would have connections with Tzfat, I think especially in the year 1709, he became one of the rabbis over there. And in Kushta, I think he was close with the famous Rabbi Aaron Alfandari, if I'm not mistaken, and other famous rabbis over there. And I think in 1714 he would go to Izmir, and I think he was appointed one of the rabbis of him. It says, "Shemesh kaposek amore hora'ab meshach shloshim v'chamesh shana v'talmidav nimra Rabbi Yaakov Shaul." Rabbi Yaakov Shaul was a famous Dayan and one of the rabbis of Izmir in his time, and author of the Kol Yaakov, if I'm not mistaken. He would eventually go to Jerusalem, become a head of Jewish court, and alongside other Dayanim, including Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov Al-Ghazi, Rabbi Yona Navon, who we're speaking about here today, who was Rabbi of the Chida, Rabbi Miyuchas Bachar Shmuel, Rabbi Yitzchak Zricha Azulei, really great rabbis. He was the father of the Chida, respectively, and he was a Ba'al Hora, let's just say. He was an expert, and within regards to halakha and so on and so forth. And he would be author of various different great Torah books, if I'm not mistaken. And you can see just the caliber of Rabbi. His Hilula is on the 17th of Tammuz. I believe we did record a video about him on a previous occasion before. He'd go on to become the Rishon LeZion between 1749 to 1755, 6 years. He was 8th Rishon LeZion, Rav Rappaport was. In between Rabbi Chaim Moshe Mizrahi and Rabbi Yaakov Al-Ghazi, if I'm not mistaken, over there. So he was very well decorated. But let's get back now speaking about Rav Navon. Over here, we went on a bit of a sidetrack. Okay. והוא חתום על מספר תקנות בירושלים כמו בעניין צניעות. They put on תקנות, various enactments with regards to modesty, מלבושי אנשים, איסור המשחק בקלפים with regards to playing cards just for gambling, ועוד תלמיד החידה כותב עליו, so the חידה will actually write about him, וכמעט לא הניח פסקן כמותו בגלילותינו והיה חסיד ומקובל. So we know that he passed away on the 16th of Shvat, Tavkuf Chaf. He was about 47 years of age when he passed away. That's something else that we have to point out within regards to the famous rabbi over here. So that's very, very interesting. Anyone tuning in live at the moment, welcome to our community, as we are exploring a few of the highlights within regards to a famous rabbi that would actually come, especially in Jerusalem in his day, who would do on various different, let's say, importances, and become very, very famous. That's something we have to point out over here. And we're recording a lot of biography videos of famous rabbis that will make their mark of yesteryear. So we happen to be speaking today about Rabbi Yona Navon. Okay, so what was his family? Aviv haya harav Chanon, as we mentioned before, his father was Rav Chanon, who haya gis shel Rav Yitzchak Zricha Azulei. Interesting enough, I think the brother-in-law of Rav Yitzchak Zricha Azulei, who was the father of the Chida. Now, who was he? Another interesting, just a phenomenal information, just within regards to Rav Yitzchak. We just have to say something within regards to him. I think it was Rav Raphael Yitzchak Zricha Azulei. He lived between 1701 and 1765. He also was a Dayan in Jerusalem, and he was close to the Pri Chadash, respectively. And also Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, if I'm not mistaken. I think he would learn in Yeshivat Bet Yaakov, obviously, as I said before. Under Rav Avram Yitzchaki, he would also be close to Rav Elazar Nahum, Rav Miuchas Bachor Shmuel. It's actually interesting. I think he would get married. So I think he was married a couple of times, if I'm not mistaken. And I think he would travel to various places of Europe, including with Rabbi Avram Ben Asher, if I'm not mistaken, and who he himself happened to be a Rosh Yeshiva in Jerusalem and rabbi in Jerusalem. I think he was actually a chief rabbi also, so he would actually travel with him. His Hilula is on the 23rd of Tevet, and author of great Torah books, also Rav Azilei. So that's something that we very much have to point out over here. So let's say a bit more about Rabbi Yona Navon. I think his grandson was a Rishon LeZion, Rabbi Yona Moshe Navon. Very interesting enough. So he would have a grandson that would become a chief rabbi, also a Rishon LeZion, very prominent position over here. So who was his grandson, Rabbi Yona Moshe Navon? We'll say a short word within regards to him, because I think it's very, very important, to actually explore the life of the various different great rabbis over here, especially on this series over here today. So Rabbi Yona Moshe Navon, I think, was a great rabbi in the 19th century. He was a 21st Rishon LeZion between 1837 to 1841, between Rav Shlomo Moshe Suzin and Rabbi Yehuda Navon. So the Navon family itself were outstanding rabbis, like to say figures in of itself, and he was also from Jerusalem. He would also learn in the famous yeshivat Bet Yaakov Pereira, if I'm not mistaken, and really do huge undertakings, if I'm not mistaken, over there. He was eventually buried in Har Hazeitim, but I would recommend everyone to learn more within regards to him. Okay, so let's explore just a bit more within regards to. So Rabbi Yona Navon, he would actually author various different books, including the Chapa Bekesef Chelek Aleph. That's first, let's say, Torah colossal book that will come about. That was, I think, printed in Kushta. It was a shut. It was Shelot Shuvot on the Dalatorim and on the Bo'or al Tosavet Aram, if I'm not mistaken, on the Smag. Nachapa Bekesef Chelek Bet, that was printed in Jerusalem. We have to point out over there another great Torah colossal book. And very interesting. Anyone tuning in live, welcome to our channel, and please don't forget to subscribe as we're exploring a few of the highlights of great Rabbi Yona Navon here on this special edition over here today. And he would actually, if I'm not mistaken, there'll be other books, including the Get Mekushar, Tionim Besefer Get Pashut Lemaharam Ben Habib. If I'm not mistaken, Rav Maharam Ben Habib was another famous rabbi, Rishon LeZion and Rosh Yeshiva in Jerusalem. Rabbi Moshe Ben Rabbi Shlomo Eben Habib. If I'm mistaken, also write a publication of Bo'or LaHalachot Pesach V'Shut Roshim Liukutim over there. So that's very, very interesting. He was the Rosh Yeshiva of Knesset Yisrael, the third Rosh Yeshiva over there between 1746 to 1749. So that's very interesting. Knesset Yisrael is another yeshiva we've spoken here on various occasions before. It stood from 1741, as we said before, and really was very, very much a famous place that we've just spoken about just beforehand, including the Talmudim of Rabbi David Chaim Shmuel Hassan, for example, Rav David Amar, Rav Yosef David Chaim Azulay, Rav Shmuel Nachmani, Rav Yehuda Cohen, and Rosh Yeshivot included the famous Rabbi Yosef Amzalek, if I'm not mistaken. He was a famous rabbi, I think, of his time, Dayan and Rosh Yeshiva in Jerusalem. There was also Rabbi Chaim Mondovi, if I'm not saying, Rabbi Yehuda Ayish, who was a rabbi in Algiers at a later stage in time. Rabbi Mordechai Yosef Miuchas, another great rabbi, another Rosh Yeshiva. Rabbi Yokef Moshe Ayash, who was a Rishon LeZion and Rosh Yeshiva in the 19th century. Let's just say Rabbi Yosef David Miuchas, who was Rosh Yeshiva. Rabbi Yitzchak Kobo, who was Rosh Yeshiva, I think, in the 19th century. And Rabbi Didier Suzen, who was Rosh Yeshiva, I think, in the year Hey Taf Reish Chaf Vav, we have to point out within regards to this place over here. So that's very, very interesting just to learn more about this great rabbi. Let's explore just a few more highlights within regards to him. I think it's very important to speak about him here at the time period of his Hilula. And once again, anyone that is tuning in live, welcome to our community over here as we're exploring a few highlights of famous rabbi that there was, very, very well decorated rabbi of yesteryear here. It's going to be his Hilula on the 16th of Shvat, something that we have to point out over here, friends. Yeah. Very interesting. So Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Knesset Yisrael was a very prestigious and key position at that point in time. That's something I very much have to stress over here on this program, this edition over here, friends. Okay. So among a few of the highlights of his book, as I said before, he was born in 1713 to 1760. And I think in 1742, just go back to Yasat HaOr HaChaim, if I'm not mistaken, the Yeshivat Knesset Yisrael in Jerusalem, along with Rabbi Chaim ben Attar, if I'm not mistaken. I think in 1744 it was when there was establishment of Yeshivat Yifa'ed Anavim, if I'm not mistaken, under Rishon LeZion, Rishut of Rav Raphael ben Asher. He was appointed one of the rabbis of the yeshiva, we have to point out, and Nechaseb Kesef in Kushta, he was appointed Dayan, and under the Rishon LeZion, it was close to Rabbi Rappaport in of itself, and so on and so forth. We're just going to take a short 1 minute break, and we're going to come back just in 1 minute over here as we're exploring the highlights of a great rabbi. We want to explore a few of the highlights from his Sefer also. Hi, Shalom, everyone. Thanks for being patient. I just want to explore just a couple of the highlights from his book before we call it a day over here. One of the teachings he gives over from the book Nechper B'Kesef in Chelek Aleph, I think it's part of the Orach Chaim Siman Aleph, if I'm not mistaken, was printed in 1748. Melamed, Shiur Talit, Chayab B'Tzitzit, Kol Shichase Rosh Ben Teisha. Over there. So that's very, very interesting enough. Another teaching. Melamed bedavar machloket kotev la'alacha v'lo l'maaseh derech masa umatan. This is, once again, this from Nechapa B'Keser Chelek Aleph. Once again from Siman Bet over there, the second part in page number 9. That was printed in Kushta also. In a bit stay. Another teaching. Melamed shemlaveh legoy v'zera b'shvi'it motrim peroteha. This once again comes from the Chelek Aleph of this book in of itself, Siman Dalet, page number 27, over here. Another teaching said, Melamed shnichalko ligzor tzanit geshamim uba'o geshamim uba'asu shalom. Over there. That comes from Chelek Bet and from Nechper B'Kesef also respectively. So that's very, very interesting. Another teaching, Melamed shelo lachapot mas al hasochorim k'shepotzrim et tovi ha'ir. Over there. This actually comes from the second Chelek also in the Choshen Mishpat discussing, and in the fifth Siman over there respectively. I think it's actually in page 119 if I'm not mistaken. And very, very important, let's just say, happening in of itself. Now friends, over here we're a community. It's always good to speak about Knesset Yisrael territory, Rishon LeZion territories. We've spoken about many of yesteryear. That's something that I very much have to point out over here. And we happen to be actually recording this on the day of Tu B'Shvat, which is obviously a very, very joyous day here in the Hebrew calendar, and a very exciting day also we have to point out. And we just want to go from strength to strength and good things just for all of Am Yisrael over here, and that just from strength to strength, and explore, educate more, and just learn more within regards to that. So we're in Tu B'Shvat today, so I'm just typing something in. And it's very exciting. We've already called. Please go on the Stories of Tzaddikim section here on the channel. We have got loads of great content from great rabbis that we've spoken about here of yesteryear. And we want to speak about, there's a whole timeline within regards to Rosh Hashiva of Knesset Yisrael. Please, everyone, go onto the channel and look over at the different writings that we actually wrote about the various different Rishon Litzions of yesteryear and of the, let's just say, the Rosh Yeshivot at different points in time, especially of Knesset Yisrael, the famous yeshiva. And watch over that video that we recorded also within regards to that specific yeshiva. So please, everyone, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and join our community. I'm wishing you all a fantastic day. Thanks for spending the time to watch with us and take care. Thank you.